MusicalTalk, the UK independent musical theatre podcast.
Hello, welcome to this week's episode of Musical Talk. I am delighted to be sitting across from Thos, as I say every time you're here.
Well, you must be very delighted, or the seat you're sitting in is incredibly comfortable.
Yes.
Maybe I'm irrelevant to this factor.
How are you?
Oh, I'm terrific, thank you. I'm also delighted to be sitting this close or this far away from you, and readers and listeners will never know. I could be in a different postcode. This could be entirely virtual.
You can read podcasts now because in the podcast app it does transcribe them, which is incredibly useful. So you can search across the entire library of Musical Talk for a specific word. So if you ever want to hear us talk,
Rudigor.
If you want to hear Thos wax lyrical about Ruggedor.
What was that one?
Ruggedor. That's the
that's the name of Scooby-Doo's brother, isn't it?
Closed very quickly, I think. If you want to hear Thos wax lyric about Rudigor, just type in for Rudigor and you'll
be presented with only 8 million options.
Yes.
Quite right.
Thos, you came up with a rather lovely idea for this week's episode, didn't you?
Well, I think so, but surely our listeners will be the final judge. Yes, I thought it might be quite fun to consider what might be called the four-stop musical theatre time machine. And the concept behind it is simply, you've been given the opportunity, or we've been given the opportunity to travel in a time machine, and we can go to any point of musical theatre history at all. And we've got 4 stops, and each stop can be anything from 1 hour to a week. And it's 4 stops each. So the plan being that each of us will pick 4 bits of musical theatre history that we would like to visit, but we would love to have had the opportunity to be at.
Or ones we were at and would like to go again?
That would be absolutely fine if you wanted to repeat a particularly joyful experience. Yes, if you had a very good ice cream in an interval once and that was, the highlight of your musical theatre career, that would be something you could go for. I mean, I assume it would have a chocolate in it just to make it extra special. But, something along those lines. So the rules are you have to pick 4 points in history that's to do with musical theatre in some way. And it could be anything as diverse as being there at the birth of Stephen Sondheim, although I can't imagine that would be thrilling, but it would be interesting to know that you could say you were there. That's not one of my options. To, as you say, going to a show that you've particularly loved and wanted to see, or meeting people from history, which I think might be the joy for me. On the route, you and I will be stopping off alternatively. So I'll pick a place, you'll pick a place, and then we'll carry on till we've done our 4 trips each. And then before we travel home,
we have to find the fuel to...
the flux... the flux capacitor may be put to full use in this, if I may say, or hadron energy, if you want to go in another direction. But after we finished our 4th one, but before we travel home in our lovely time machine, we can both talk about what we would have looked at in the future through the window, through the time machine's porthole. So there we are. That's the concept. I've probably made that longer than the episode will be, but that's the idea. So are you happy to travel with me in my copyright-busting non-blue police box?
Yes, or your LeDorean.
LeDorean car. That's right. Yes, which I very much adore.
LeDorean grey.
Yeah, I adore my LeDorean. Yes, quite. So, are you happy to travel with me?
Yes.
Fine. Well, in which case, well, that was quiet, wasn't it?
Fluxing, capaciting.
So, shall I start with the place I think I would like to start?
Yes.
And for me, it is the start. I think the place I would like to go has at least a claim to be the beginning of British musical theatre. Or if not the beginning, a misstart. And bearing in mind that people probably have a rough idea about the kind of thing I particularly like, I'm not sure it'd be that difficult to work out. Would you like to hazard a guess as to what it is?
I'm guessing it involves a certain W.S. Gilbert at some point.
It does indeed involve a wonderful W.S. Gilbert, William Schwenk Gilbert, and his mate, Arthur Sullivan. And I use the words advisedly because they were actually extremely friendly for the first part of their career. An old friend of this program explained to me once that actually they started to get on each other's nerves when they were touring America after the Pirates of Penzance. So they'd written 2 or 3 or 4 shows by then. So in that very early era, they really hit it off. So it is about their friendship. So Gilbert and Sullivan, for me, are the start of British musical theatre. I know there's a question about whether...
And the end.
In some senses, that's true. But there's a question, isn't there, whether someone once told me off and said, well, comic opera isn't musical theatre. It is, of course, musical theatre. It isn't just musicals, but I think they're all part of a big family. So as far as I'm concerned, they count. And there's something very strange. And everyone knows this about Gilbert and Sullivan. There is a lost Gilbert and Sullivan Thespis. The first show they wrote together in 1869, I think it is. It wasn't put on by D'Oyly Carte. It was put on by John Hollingshead. And it wasn't put on at the Savoy. It was put on at the Gaiety Theatre in London, long gone. But in 1869, they were put together to write their first proper musical called Thespis. It was a 2-act full musical. Its subtitle was The Gods Grown Old. The theory was, or the plot, was about the great gods of classical history who live on Mount Olympus, and they've grown old and bored, so they want to swap places with humans so they can go off and enjoy themselves on the planet Earth, and the people they swap with are a theatrical company, and the theatrical company then has to adopt the roles of these gods and, of course, get it all wrong. That's the plot. The script exists, but the score does not. And the reason it's important, so I've travelled back to 1869 and I'm at the Gaiety Theatre on the opening night of Thespis. That is my first trip. And there's several things I want to do. So I'll probably try and be here for a few days so I can see Thespis more than once. That's my plan. But I want to be there on the opening night to see it, because I don't know this, but there may have been cut songs. So there may be some really early Gilbert and Sullivan numbers which aren't even recorded in terms of lyrics, because all the lyrics of the libretto still exist, it's believed, but who knows what was cut from that first night, because there's almost no records in that sense. The authorised version of the libretto features or doesn't feature a character who's mentioned in the reviews in the newspapers. So we know the character called Venus was appearing on stage, for whatever reason, isn't included in the script. So we know the script is different from even what we do have isn't even accurate. So and there's no score at all. What's famously known is, I think there's 2 songs which survive with music and lyrics, and the rest are just lyrics and the book. I would like to be there at the very earliest days of Gilbert and Sullivan having a good time. I would like to hear the score of Thespis. That is the holy grail for any Gilbert and Sullivan fan. I would like to see how Gilbert and Sullivan change Thespis after the first night, if they do. And finally, I would, I'd bring a tape recorder. I'd certainly record it. And I'd also bring a smart camera so I could take photographs of the manuscript. So if I lose the recording, I've got the score at least. So that's what I'm doing for posterity. I'm going back to collect and harvest Thespis. But I want to see Gilbert and Sullivan in their first connection. Thespis, what an even better name. I like that. And I'd love to meet Gilbert and Sullivan when they're young and when they've yet to prove who they are. And when they're still finding...
Didn't turn into difficult divas, probably.
Well, one of them turned into a difficult diva, or rather, the difficult divadom came out. W.S. Gilbert was a little bit of a martinet. Sullivan was a much more calm, passive man. But in this early stage, they're jolly. What you must never forget about difficult diva Gilbert is he also had a huge sense of humour, not just in his writing. He was, as a young man, he was a very tall man. He was famously seen roller skating when roller skates were first invented. So he was a real early adopter, roller skating up and down Kensington where he lived. And this idea of this incredibly 6-foot-something tall man roller skating when no one had seen anyone on roller skates before in London is, I think, a remarkable thing. And he was still giving comedy interviews to newspapers in the last few years of his life in the Edwardian era. I digress. I'd like to see Thespis. I'd like to see what it was. I'd like to find out what happened to the character of Venus. I'd like to meet Gilbert and Sullivan, and I'd like to make a recording and photograph the score. That's where I'm going. But I want to be there for the first week so I can see it 3 or 4 times. And then I can probably spend the rest of my natural life banging on about it, because that's what I would do.
Well, you do anyway.
Well, I'm doing it, and I haven't even seen it, even in this interview. So there we are. Thespis, that's my first port of call, 1869 at the Gaiety Theatre in London.
Lovely.
And we'll see if they do ice cream in the interval there as well.
Yes. I don't know what, I'll check, but there's a story about why they do ice creams at the theatre. Do you?
I don't know.
Are you aware of that story?
No.
I'll look it up while you do your next bit, Thos. But my one is... So
this is our second journey. So we've packed off back into our LeDorean. Yeah, quite, absolutely. This one's only got a sky roof, so we have to clamber in through the top. It hasn't got any of these clever side doors.
No.
All on the top. Going through the hatchback.
we put the beer in the canister and it's all ready to go. I would go back to. I would spend 2 days in December 2019.
Oh, right. Okay. So literally 3 or 4 months before lockdown.
Yeah, nothing to do with lockdown.
Oh, but that certainly sets it in time, though, doesn't it?
It's the one, or it was just before, or it was the one Palladium pantomime.
Oh, yes.
I missed that I would have loved to have seen. And because it had Paul O'Grady and
the late Paul
O'Grady and Julian Clary in it. Together.
Were they dames together?
They weren't dames. It was always Gary Wilmot being the dame in those.
Because I'd have thought that they might have been the ugly sisters in Cinderella. But
let me see what they were in. But it's just, I think, to see that pairing, it was Goldilocks at the Palladium and Julian Clary, and I think he was the King Rat.
In Goldilocks and the Three Bears?
Sorry, Goldilocks and the... I will continue reading. Sorry, there's a Goldilocks at the Palladium with Julian Clary. Yeah, it's the one I didn't see. Where was he? Julian Clary plays the ringmaster. And, of course, I have Paul Zerdin.
Sorry, can I just say that's immediately double entendre, and I'm loving it already. Thank you very much.
Musical Talk stall. Matt Baker was in it as well.
Was he now? From the One Show at the time?
And Nigel Havers, of course.
Of course.
But yes, Julian Clary, My Dick, One Olivier, and all that kind of stuff.
Yes. All the Panto favourites.
But yeah, it's just that kind of, it's the one... I like the Palladium pantomime. I didn't go to the latest one with Catherine Tate with it, which is a shame, but it's become so popular and so expensive.
Well, of course, it's a moneymaker now, isn't it? Yes.
And it's not pantomime, but it's the kind of...
what is it now then? It's moved from pantomime to what? Variety?
Yeah, they've always said it's gone back to the Palladium roots and it's now just a outright variety show. Michael Harrison, who writes and directs it, says there's no plot. We don't even bother now. It's just...
Nothing as heavy as Goldilocks.
No, it's just the same kind of stock players coming back to do the same old stock, and it works for the audience. But it's that kind of...
But you've got a hole in your schedule, as it were.
Yeah, it's a pairing of Julian Clary and Paul O'Grady, which I would have loved to have seen, because I do miss Paul O'Grady.
Yes, and he's was a much loved national icon. And I can imagine he, together with, he and Julian Clary are both great stage performers in that.
And great friends as well.
Yeah. And there's a kind of sense of cabaret about them and a sense of vaudeville about them. And I can imagine they would make a great double act. I'm oddly more intrigued by the fact that they went for Goldilocks. I think Goldilocks and the Three Bears is a really unusual title for a pantomime these days, whereas ironically, if we'd stepped out briefly from watching Thespis in 1869, we'd have probably found Goldilocks and the Three Bears in the Victorian...
And Babes in the Wood as well.
All those lovely pantomimes, which were much more common, and which have just sort of died away very sadly. Humpty Dumpty was done a lot. Humpty Dumpty, I learnt the plot of recently, was something like Humpty Dumpty wants to marry the king's daughter, and so does a handsome prince. So they, basically they're rivals in love for the hand of marriage of the king's daughter. Quite how that's then extrapolated into 2 acts, I have no idea.
Now it's condensed into a limerick
or an omelette.
Yeah, cracking good. Idea there, but that's
hey, the yoke's on him.
I know. That's my first stop.
But that's interesting, isn't it? Because there's a 130 years difference essentially, or more.
That might be a theme in this episode. I think.
In fact, probably more like 150 episodes. Yes, quite. Yes, I was going to say you're going to be contemporary, and I suspect I should be a little bit more historic.
Yes.
Now that's really interesting because I don't think I'd have guessed that about you. That's the interesting thing for me, that in my head I've got a couple of things I think you might want to go and see or do or be at, and I'm not sure just catching up with a missed pantomime, great though it was at the Palladium, is the thing I would have thought of. That's really interesting. I will just briefly match that with another Palladium pantomime, which I think was in the early 60s, when Rodgers and Hammerstein had done their television Cinderella, and it was remade a number of times on American television, but in London it came to the Palladium and was that year's
Colosseum.
Or was it the Colosseum?
It was a Colosseum.
Or maybe it was the Colosseum.
Yeah.
But Kenneth Williams was one of the Ugly Sisters, and I'd have paid good money just to have seen that.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
Was that Frankie Howard? I don't know. They're all the same.
No, that was more. There was more. They're not all the same. That was more Kenneth.
Yeah.
But that was amazing, and I love the idea that actually in Britain it was turned into a panto. You know, the Ugly Sisters are women in the American TV versions. They are men dressed as women in the British pantomime tradition. In Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella. I just love the idea, but there we are. So, well, we've had one apiece. Would you care to have another guess as to what my next port of call is? I'm going in chronological order, by the way.
Oh, of course you are.
I have a neat and tidy mind.
I don't know, something in the 1920s?
I'm not yet that modern.
No, something in the 1910s?
Nope.
1900s?
Nope. There's not many options left as we started in the 1860s.
The 1890s.
Closer.
Okay, put me out of our misery, Thos.
1880s.
Yes, there we
You
go.
were so close. Now, I'm sticking with a theme here. Now, you know as well as I do what my favourite Gilbert and Sullivan is. You've mangled it already.
Ruddy Gore.
Ruddy Gore it is, that's right. Now,
You ruddy bore.
so I'm going to move from 1869 to 1887. So this is Rudigore now, and I would really like to be there once again for a week from the opening night of Gilbert and Sullivan's Rudigore in 1887. And the reason for this, as I've mentioned on Musical Talk before, is that Rudigore is the oddest of the Gilbert and Sullivan's in the sense that it was very thoroughly rewritten after its first night. So it opens in 1887. It's even spelt differently. It's Ruddydygore, as in Ruddy Gore, to show how gothic and melodramatic it is, even though there's no gore in it at all. But it's Ruddy Gore, and unfortunately, it was the first Gilbert and Sullivan after the Mikado, which had been this enormous hit in 1885, I think. And so in 1887, when Rudigore opens, Act 1 goes quite comfortably, but after Act 2, there seems to be some dissatisfaction in the audience. People didn't like it as much compared to the Mikado. And it counted in its own way as the first Gilbert and Sullivan failure at the time. Now, it still made a lot of money and it ran for a few years, but it was the only one that wasn't revived from the classic range of Gilbert and Sullivan's, from Trial by Jury up to the Gondoliers, in the life of either Gilbert or Sullivan. It was first revived into the 1920s. So it wasn't revived for 20 years, 40 years. But, and this is why I want to be there, we are nearly 20 years on from Thespis. The relationship between Gilbert and Sullivan is cordial, but it is not friendly in the way it used to be. So I'd love to see that change of their personality, because it's, you know, you described him as a bit of a diva, but actually it's much more psychologically complicated. He's an insecure man, is W.S. Gilbert, but with a huge sense of humour. So he takes offence very quickly, but he doesn't hold a grudge for very long, or rather he does, but he will also get over a grudge. He doesn't hold a grudge for life. He's happy to just say, oh, I know we're not arguing, but let's now get over that fancy dinner tonight, or something like that. So I think Gilbert is a fascinating psychological study, and watching him 20 years on in middle age, as a successful middle-aged man, with Sullivan, with whom he's able to work cordially, and now with D'Oyly Carte acting as their kind of sort of a diplomatic ambassador as well as their impresario. So there's a really interesting psychological triangle waiting to be explored there. Then you've also got Rudigore on its opening night to see what the public actually did think of it. You know, it's how it's reported and what actually happened may not be the same thing. Stories get created, as you know. And then I'd love to, this is why I want to stay for a week, I would love to hang around at the back of the Savoy with Gilbert and Sullivan the next morning when they're working out what they think they need to do. And as you know briefly, I suspect from previous episodes of Musical Talk, you know, they changed, they cut songs, they added songs, they rewrote songs and then cut those songs. Gilbert and Sullivan's Rudigore is the one where you've actually got a smorgasbord of opportunities. Any version of it now has to make a decision. Which ending are you going to use? Is it going to have a patter song? Which of the two patter songs is it going to be? Or are you going to cut them both? Are you going to include the romantic song that was cut, unbelievably? You know, which overture do you want to use? So there's a whole bunch of things going on that you can pick. I want to see the thought patterns about what Gilbert and Sullivan do to do what every writer of musical theatre has done since. The next day, what do we cut? What do we keep? What do we need to rewrite? What do we need to do? How do you repair a damaged musical? And I think watching Gilbert and Sullivan doing it and they're hugely successful, experienced people by now, would be a really fascinating thing. And also just to find out what did happen from point A to point B. And we're still living with the consequences of that. So for me, and it's no surprise, but Rudiger is right up there. But it's not just an idol, I love Rudiger, which I do. There's Rudiger for a reason. What's the psychology behind the creators? What's the mindset behind a mood behind the creators with this difficulty? And how do they deal with it?
Has there ever been a biopic or, dare I say, a musical of
Gilbert and Sullivan?
Yeah.
Well, off the top of my head, very quickly, there was in the 1950s something called The Story of Gilbert and Sullivan, directed by Launder and Gilliat, who are a famous couple of British film directors, starring Robert Morley as W.S. Gilbert and Maurice Evans as Sullivan. There was Topsy Turvy, of course, but that's a much more narrow period. That's Mike Lee's doing the build-up to the Mikado. So that's just 2 or 3 years. That's the period from between Princess Ida to the Mikado. And that's fabulous as well. In Edinburgh, many years ago, there was a show by Detty Ellaby and another gentleman whose name was Tom, and I don't remember his surname, I'm very sorry to say it, who wrote Gilbert and Sullivan the musical, where they rewrote Sullivan's lyrics with the stories of their life. And that's also where I met Josh Clark, fellow Musical Talk presenter. That's just 3. And then there's been a series of others. So, for example, there's a very rare half-hour film called The Return of Gilbert and Sullivan, which I'd love to see because I don't actually know what it's about. But it sounds fabulous.
It's very obvious, I think.
Well, I mean, yes, but I mean, that would be interesting, I think, wouldn't it, to see how someone imagined whatever this return would be. So, yes, they have been featured in a number of biopics and things of various accuracy. But the problem is their career is enormous when you look at them, and it's too much to plop into a film. You'd have to do a Netflix series, actually. I can't imagine them getting the money for that. But there is a really interesting psychological story between the two of them. What do you do when you've got a temperamental creative and a passive creative who thinks, but who's also superior, who thinks he's, who believes that he's sort of demeaning himself by writing popular music when he should be writing classical music? That is the dynamic between the two of them, and it's fascinating.
It was Leonard Bernstein, wasn't it?
Well, the story has been oft repeated, as you say. So there we are. That's my second trip. It's this time I'm in London, 1887, now at the Savoy, as you'd expect. But and we could weekend at Richard Doyley Cart's house down by Walton on the Thames, I think it is. Walton on Thames, which is called Doyley Cart Island, which I visited for the first time last year in 2025. He built a family home there. And the one thing I'm going to tell you about it, and the thing that's always fascinating me, is that it had modern lavatories, flush lavatories, as you'd expect from a rich family in the 1880s. But they had flushes which you pulled up.
Okay.
The handle was on the floor, and once you'd finished, you would pick the handle up and you would flush upwards to make the lavatories work. I don't even know how that works. Victorians, marvellous, love them. You've got to love the Victorians. If there's a complicated but brilliant way of doing something, they'll find a way. So there, that's my idea. I'm seeing Rudiger and I'm using the upward flush lavatories on Doyley Cart Island.
Brilliant.
See where Musical Talk takes you?
Yeah, I mean, I hope you haven't got some sort of Victorian illness at some point, Thos, because you seem to be hell-bent in staying in the Victorian period, but maybe you'll move to the 1910s in our next slot.
Yeah, well, I suppose, I mean, yes, I mean, I don't know what a good Victorian... well, I don't want to catch... Oh, was it called? Consumption?
Yeah.
Because that would make me the Lady of the Camellias.
Or liver.
Or indeed passion.
Yeah. I want to go to...
Yes, this is your second journey.
Yes, I want to go to the Wimbledon Theatre in June 1960. Now, what happened then, Thos? Can you...
Now, the Wimbledon Theatre, I've just got to check a couple of facts with you. It's now the new Wimbledon Theatre, so I'm guessing it's the historic one that precursor.
The original, the old Wimbledon Theatre.
The old Wimbledon Theatre in 1960. Oh, hang on. Right, I'll tell you, I was going to think, surely he's not there to see the fabulous musical about Dr. Crippen that so upset people at the time, partly because the people involved in the Crippen case were still alive.
Yeah.
And what was that show called? Belle. It was named after his wife. And the music was by a man called Monty Norman, who's now most famous for writing the James Bond theme.
I was going to say, James Bond.
But you're not talking about that. That was about that period. I've suddenly guessed that you're talking Oliver.
Yeah, so let me kind of go, but you my original go-to answer would be to see the big production of Oliver that I loved in 1994 at the London Palladium with Jonathan Pryce, and it was a big lavish.
That was quite old boy for Oliver.
Yeah, as Fagin. And,
good.
Yeah, and talking about having this production the other night because we're watching a Midsummer Murders, and an actor called Miles Anderson was on it, who played Bill Sykes in this production. He was terrifying, and it was a wonderful production. But I thought, well, I've seen that, and then it came back to Drury Lane, so I saw it again. So I thought I'd rather go not to the West End version. It was at the Owlbury, I believe. I want to see the world premiere at the Wimbledon Theatre because it's a bit nearer. And
so it's on the tube.
Yeah. And Ron Moody.
Yes, as Fagin.
And Barry Humphries.
What was Barry Humphries?
He was Mr. Sowerbury.
Was he?
He was. And
I didn't know that.
I have a programme of it here. Keith Hampshire was Oliver Twist. Paul Whitson-Jones was Mr. Bumble.
I know Paul Whitson-Jones. Paul Whitson-Jones was a character actor who did a lot of television in the 1960s. He appeared in a few Hammer films, and, of course, he appeared in Doctor Who The Smugglers, the penultimate William Hartnell story before the Cybermen were introduced. So I know Paul Whitson-Jones.
Good for him. And Hope Jackman.
Great name.
As Mrs. Corney. Betty Turner as Old Sally, a pauper. Barry Humphries as Mr. Sowerbury. Sonia Fraser as Mrs. Sowerbury. Applebrook, which I...
Wonderful drink. I loved an Applebrook.
Kelly's mother, I'm guessing. Charlotte, their daughter. And Trevor Ray as Noah Claypole. Ron Moody as Fagin, of course, which would have been amazing to see.
And put him on the map in a way, didn't it?
Martin Horsey as the Artful Dodger. Georgia Brown as Nancy.
Yes. I mean, and she was an amazing British singer.
Diane Gray, Danny Sewell, George Bishop, Claude Jones, and Madeline Newbury. I just thought it'd be really interesting
I agree with you there.
To kind of go back and see the rebirth of the British musical, because that's what it is, isn't it?
100% that. Yeah, that's the time we've decided to stop doing the Salad Daisies and The Boyfriend, all of which are wonderful, don't get me wrong. But this is the first time we beat the Americans at their own game, i.e. the first British Broadway-style musical, I think, would be the easiest, neatest way of doing absolutely British, but with the pizzazz that the Americans do so well in Broadway. That's a very good choice. How long are you staying, though? Are you just staying for the performance of the... Well, the
Wetherspoons wasn't open yet, so probably just for the performance.
Well, no, but surely you want to go off afterwards, don't you? And don't you want to meet Lionel Bart?
What was he like then? Because fame hadn't got to his head yet.
No, I mean, this is his first... Well, he'd had a few shows beforehand, I think. Did he do Lock Up Your Daughters, which I think was a restoration comedy musical he'd done? And he'd written pop songs. He was a pop singer. No, he was a pop writer.
I mean, are we assuming that we run the UK's longest running theatre podcast at this point? So we have our handheld recorder and we are able to go and get these exclusive interviews.
I'm recording Thespis, and if I can get... Forgive me, if you think I'm not getting an interview with Gilbert and Sullivan for Musical Talk in the future, you're very much mistaken. That would put us on the map forever.
Yeah.
But yes.
I'd like to interview / meet Lionel Bart, but...
I'd love to meet Lionel Bart.
Yeah.
Can I say one thing about Lionel Bart? Lionel Bart, by his own admission, was a great working class writer. He famously couldn't play the piano. He hummed all his tunes into a dictaphone or whatever it was. But the man knew what he was doing. He was a big personality. That show is terrific. And Noel Coward, who's nobody's fool, said, I would rather spend an afternoon in the company of Lionel Bart more than almost anyone else. So Lionel Bart had something. Now, what that something is with hindsight is possibly slightly less charming. Don't know, because obviously the man's ultimately suffered terribly in his life by his own hand as well. But in 1959, 1960, when he's doing all the work for Oliver, he's an up-and-coming talent with... I suspect he'd be at his best.
And his most hungry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a terrific choice,
that's my
actually.
answer.
Yeah, I love it. We'll go and see the show, and then we'll hang around long enough to try and catch up with Lionel and Georgia Brown and Ron Moody. I saw Ron Moody being interviewed at the very end of his life.
It was meant to be quite difficult.
Well, I tell you, but he was absolutely charming. I saw him at the National Theatre being interviewed. And it was literally towards the end of his life. He was a very, very old man. He'd written his autobiography. I can't remember what it was called, but but he was there to sort of introduce it and promote it. But even as a man in his late 80s, he was on show, so he was performing, but he was funny. His memory hadn't failed at all, so he had anecdotes about performing. He remembered telling us stories about what it was like to appear as Fagin in 1960 and elsewhere and on Broadway. But his memory went all the way back to the 30s when he was a little boy. And he's doing impressions of British musical theatre stars from the 1930s, Sonny and Binny Hale, people who are probably not exactly names now, sadly.
They're still names, just no one's heard of them.
Well, most people haven't heard of them, Nick. I've heard of them. But yes, exactly. But here's a man sitting in a room doing impressions of people from the 1930s that I would have thought 10% of that very elderly audience would have got, and me, but loving it. And even if you didn't, I was with someone else and he didn't know who these people were, but you just got swept up. That man had charisma, and I feel a great privilege of having had a chance to see him before he passed. Do carry on.
Yeah.
Good choice.
Yeah, thank you. That's my next stop on this.
So we're halfway through our trip because we've had 2 each.
Ice cream?
Oh, why not? Yes, absolutely. Yes, quite. And a drink on a stick, as my father likes to call a lolly. Actually, I think my mother calls it that as well. It must have been the thing in the 50s. Right. We've had our refreshment. We've queued for a very long time for a small lavatory in a theatre, because that's what you do. It's traditional. Worse if you're a woman, of course. Those queues don't finish until well after the show. Yeah. But next stop is mine. Now, I'm moving into the 20th century for you now. My last 2 stops.
Hold your breath.
Yeah, both of my last 2 stops are 20th century. Now, would you like to have
on the 20th century?
I wouldn't be seeing that, although I would be interested to see it, but I'm not wasting one of my lovely time travelling trips there. Would you care to hazard a guess as to what my third stop might be? That's interesting. Actually, Noel Coward doesn't turn up in my journey, but I did toy with Noel Coward, as it were.
Sure you did. Is that where you were last night on your time machine?
Yes, I have a separate journey. That's quite. But you're in the right era.
Are we American or British? I'm presuming British.
All my trips are British.
Yeah.
But I'll give you a clue. The piece I want to see is an American piece with American performers.
Okay.
But I'm seeing it in London.
I don't know. Tell me.
Right. Well, if Gilbert and Sullivan are not, I'll say that sentence again. I think what I'm trying
Cole
to
Porter.
Oh, nearly the next one along. If I love Gilbert and Sullivan, but if I'm not in the mood for Gilbert and Sullivan, I'm in the mood for George and Ira Gershwin.
Okay. Yeah.
Gershwin. For me, any piece of Gershwin song music, and I make the distinction between his songs and his classical music. I enjoy the classical music, but I don't go to that for fun. Any of his songs just fill me with joy. I don't know how. He's absolutely taps into the pulse of the era in which he wrote.
He's got rhythm.
Very good. I'm liking your work. But I love his work. I love the Gershwins' work, and I think it's George first and Ira second. I love their work together, and I love George's music. And my favourite George Gershwin is Lady Be Good. And in London, as on Broadway, when Lady Be Good came to London in 1926, 1927, something like that, about then, I'm not quite certain, certainly mid-20s, we had Fred and Adele, his sister Astaire, in the title roles. And unusually about Lady Be Good, the central characters are a brother and sister. So they're not in a relationship which is a romantic one. In fact, they both have to go off and find a woman and a man respectively. So they are a brother and sister dance act. At the time, Adele Astaire was the bigger star than Fred in that relationship. She was the one, i.e. the brother and sister relationship. They could both dance brilliantly, but she was the funny one, and he was somehow seen as slightly the feline of a stooge, even though he had great comic skills, which later come out. But to see Fred and Ginger, no, I'll say that again, not Ginger, she would have been watching in the audience if she was there. To see Fred and Adele Astaire on the London stage in the mid-20s with George and Ira in the wings, because they would certainly have been there, indeed they were there, it's well documented. I'm staying again for, in this case, 48 hours. I want to go to the opening night of Lady Be Good. I want to see Fred and Adele Astaire reprise their marvellous performance that they were doing on Broadway and came to London with. I want to see George and Ira in conversation afterwards. I want to go to the party after the first night, where you might also have met the Prince of Wales, later to be Edward VIII. You might have met Noel Coward. You probably would have met the man called Desmond Carter. Desmond Carter isn't a terribly well-known name today, but Desmond Carter was the British lyricist that American shows always used to amplify their wording from American to British English. And he would also write the occasional lyric himself. And so he is one of those rare, he's a British lyricist who wrote lyrics for
He's like the
Gershwin songs.
of the French musicals.
If you like, yeah, absolutely. But I think there's a story waiting to be told about Desmond Carter, because he was a top-notch British lyricist of Broadway quality who just happened to stay in Britain. And you find he's done lyrics with Gershwin and other great composers who've come over here and done shows. So I want to see the show on its opening night. I want to meet the cast and the crew at the party. I want to see their guests at the party. And then I'd like to stay, so I think 48 hours I said, I'd like to see it again the next night once it's starting to settle into its run. And that would be my
Everyone has a slight hangover.
Indeed. But actually, I always think I don't think you never get a show right on its first night. I think the cast are always super tense. And they can do a brilliant performance, but it's a real energy performance. Sometimes things go wrong and you have to improvise around it. I think it starts turning into what it's going to be from night 2, night 3, night 4. So, but there we are. That's for me, my third trip. And I have so far progressed from 1869 to the middle of the 1920s. So I've literally only done about 50 to 60 years in my travels so far.
We've done very well, Thos.
For me, I've travelled a long way. Yes, quite.
I want to...
so you're now on your third trip?
Yes. And
we've said goodbye to Fred and Adele.
Goodbye, Fred and Adele. I thought you were wonderful doing your...
It was marvellous.
Yes. I want to go to March 2014.
Oh.
To the...
You've stayed in the 21st century so far.
Of course.
Yeah. Of course.
London Palladium, and we were talking about this only earlier. I would want to see again, knowing how famous and successful Cynthia Erivo now is from the Wicked franchise. I would want to see her knowing what she would to become in, and plus I just adored the show, and I know you have an affinity for I Can't Sing, the X Factor musical.
I love it too.
As well. And I'd want to see that show again for the first time.
Well, I'm very glad I'm joining you on this journey. I'll join you with great pleasure on that one.
Because I remember you said something about it which made me laugh. You said it's the best 1920s musical comedy I've seen in a long time.
Yes, actually, there may be something in that. I wonder. I mean, it's a pure, unadulterated musical comedy. Well, tell me, what is it about it? I mean, you've given the reason that you know someone in it's going to go off and do something terribly
I've
brilliant.
recently watched it again.
Yes.
And it's very easy to do should you wish to watch it again. And it's
in
nice.
The usual channels.
Yes, it's nice that it exists. I miss Steve Brown.
The composer.
Dearly, the composer and lyricist.
Yeah, and I feel there were so many more shows waiting to happen from his pen.
And we had him on the podcast a couple of years before he died, and it was a very fortuitous meeting that happened.
Yeah.
When he was working on his...
you can't call him an unsung talent, because obviously everything he did was sung. Yeah. But my goodness, he's missed, yes.
Yes, and it's kind of seeing something in hindsight that it'd be nice to kind of... Every lyric rhymes, and every... stress is perfect, and every song is a perfect pastiche that just matches that moment. The wordplay, the Irish song when the little leprechauns come out and they get the track is stuck on when you make a wish, it happens. We're shit, we're shit, we're shit, we're shit.
I wonder what the joke is.
And the alien nonsense. I mean, it was just utterly bonkers.
I mean, I warm very strongly to the comedy of Harry Hill. Yeah. And he's infused all the way through it as well. Yeah.
And just Simon Lipkin and the talking dog, and it's utter zaniness. And I don't think we see that much anymore.
Well, what it has, it's high production value silly. And high production value silly is very rare. You see silly a lot at the Fringe because silly is quite cheap. Yeah. You very rarely see it made big, because the problem with silly is that people who fancy they have a sense of humour but don't look down on it. But actually, silly is a really important part of British theatrical tradition, as well as, well, television as well. But, pantomime, there's a lot of silly in
pantomime, which is silly and grand.
You do indeed, and you've mentioned that already. That's a very big part of the tradition. Monty Python, the Goodies. The silly goes a long way, and I'm warm to silly. So I think it's a really good example of silly, and I agree with you. Very sadly, very few high production valued silly shows in London. The problem with I Can't Sing it was almost too expensive to run for a long time, and in the Palladium. I just wondered if it had been I think if they slightly smaller theatre, they might have
around the country
and got a bit of reputation
for 2 weeks only at the Alexandra Theatre in Birmingham or whatever. You can see, because like X Factor, it toured around the country.
Yeah, which it was sort of tied to at the time, although the subtle branding loses. It's removed over time. Is it to try and make it stand on its own 2 feet? Yeah, it was. I think it's one of the most enjoyable shows I've seen in the last 20 years. I can certainly still say that. Yeah, and I'm glad it exists. And I think you're exactly right about the quality. Whole
street.
Well, the quality of the...
Sorry, that is reference to the show. I was
going to say, I ignored you there because I didn't think you were talking about me. Even down to what might be called the little throwaway songs. Our hero, Alan the plumber, I seem to remember, who he decides to throw away all the songs which are, the confectionery songs which are written for him and write a song from the heart. And he sings this little ballad on his banjo. And I can't remember what it's called, but the tune has stuck with me for a very long time. And I think it's called The Tune I Wrote for You, isn't it? Something like that. It's low key. It's delightful. And it sort of plays against the rest of the show. You've had this big bombastic show, and then there's a little moment of sincerity. And actually that really travels. So there's so much craft. Yeah, these are really good choices, Nick. I'm very pleased. How long are you staying?
Well, I don't like Oxford Street that much. So
it's it was at the
Palladium.
It's in Argyle Street.
Off Oxford Street. And it's annoying because there's only one entrance to the tube station. But as we're travelling by LeDorean,
where would you park it?
I would go one day, but I'd see the show twice because
matinee and evening.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those shows that we will never see anything like that again.
No, and it will never be revived.
Which is a real shame because it's a real sum up of British ridiculousness. And it was amazing to see Simon Cowell be attached to something and he was able to be completely obliterated.
Well, he was comically and satirically torn to shreds.
Yes.
But actually, what a marvellous sense of humour to be able to have that you allow yourself to do that. It also does, in a way, show you've made it, though.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's also a microcosm of British culture at that time.
The 2 great visual gags he had where he descended from a cloud.
Yes.
And his legs were dangling over the top of the cloud.
I do.
And then he pushes open the gate and the legs are attached to the cloud. And then there's the same thing when he was on his pedal bike.
It's a treadmill, isn't it? It is a pedal bike. Yes, that's right, yeah.
And the legs are still going when he's off it. I mean, it's just kind of wonderful.
Those are Tommy Cooper style gags, those are. Yes, quite.
But it's kind of just, I miss kind of, I know we have the Palladium pantomime and it is that same extravagance, but to have it as a uniquely written musical.
With surrealist props, actually, that's nice.
Like The Fly.
Yeah.
I mean, for those who haven't seen this show, you're thinking,
you don't know what we're talking about. But it is, as you say, a version is viewable still if you look for it.
Yeah.
I think it's terrific. I wish there'd been a cast album. I really do.
And we there was a tribute concert to Steve Brown shortly after he died, and Musical Talk opens the whole show, which was nice.
The extract of your interview.
Yeah, because our interview, it's so hard to find an interview with Steve Brown anywhere. We seem to have the only one that exists. So,
do you know, it's quite interesting because we've lasted so long. Some of our materials are becoming historic materials. You probably know that we were approached to use extracts of my interview with Marnie Nixon as well, because after she passed away, there are hundreds of other interviews with her, but not as readily available as we are. Yeah. Excellent choice.
Thank you.
Well, we're heading on for our final trips. So, I told you already I'm in the 21st century. I think you're probably not going to guess my fourth one, but I'm going to give you the opportunity to try.
21st century.
Oh no, 20th. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, no. I'm still in the
rather excited there.
No. I'm not treading in that century. I know what happens. No. We're in the 20th century, and I'll give you a clue. We're in the second 50 years, not in the first.
Okay, so Another British musical moment, I'm guessing.
Yes, a British musical moment, but with technically non-British writers.
Okay, so are we...
So it couldn't be more British in many ways, but the composer and the lyricist, non-British.
Are we in Stephen Sondheim territory or Kander and Ebb territory here?
I'm going to be honest with you. I did seriously think about whether I wanted to touch something Sondheimian, but in the end...
We've all been there.
Well, yes, quite. But in the end, I thought, no, I'd rather be here for this.
Yeah.
So your question was, is it Sondheimian or Kander and Ebb?
No. Put the audience out of their misery, Thos. Tell us.
I'm not sure me talking ever puts anyone out of their misery. The show that I would like to see is I've travelled to 1974, I think it is. It could be 73. I think it's 74. And it's The Good Companions. Now, that may or may not ring any bells with you, but The Good Companions is a legendary British musical. I say British. It was written for the British audiences. It's based on a book by J.B. Priestley called The Good Companions, which is a terrific read anyway. And I'd recommend it to anyone listening. It's a marvellous book. And if you want a microcosm of what British amateur theatrical work was like in the 1920s and 30s, it's such a good novel. It's considered a great classic novel in its own right. It was adapted for stage by a man called Ronald Harwood, who was one of the great lights of British theatre. The score is by Andre Previn, and the lyrics are by the late Johnny Mercer. It was, I think, the last show he did before he died in 1975. It starred Judi Dench when she was still a musical theatre actress, because she'd also been in cabaret in this country.
And not in Cats, famously.
Not at the time.
No.
Yeah. And
she then went on not to do Cats.
Well, I could say it's true of me. I'm not sure. I've also not been in Cats, if that's any shock.
She was going to do it.
Yeah.
And she broke her leg.
You see, I don't think I knew that, you see. Okay, fine. But I didn't have to break a leg to get out of my contract with Cats. I just didn't ask. So Judi Dench is in it. John Mills is in it. Now, John Mills...
He's also in Cats, yeah.
Yes, but John Mills was one of the... started his career in musical theatre in the 1920s. I think his first show was The Friday Night Girl, I think it is called, in 1929, something like that. No one remembers it very much, but that was his very first show. He started in musical theatre. He worked a lot with Vivian Ellis, who was one of the great British writers of the 30s that people don't remember, sadly. But
had a Vivian Ellis Award, though.
Yes, and quite right. Like Ivan Novello, actually, the awards sometimes make the people's name live. Vivian Ellis... thumbnail sketch is somewhere between Ivan Novello and Noel Coward in terms of the British pantheon. Noel Coward, very, very funny, but not necessarily very emotional. Ivan Novello, all emotional, not very funny. Vivian Ellis, almost perfectly in the middle. Bit of everything. Oddly, slightly more versatile than the two of them. There we are. So we've got John Mills, who's sort of coming to the end of his stage career. He still had many years to work, but his stage career is starting to come to an end. Not as far as I'm aware.
Okay.
But so he's in it. Judi Dench is in it. A man by the name of Christopher Gable, who's probably most famous these days, either in Doctor Who as Sharaz Jek or in The Slipper and the Rose, the Sherman Brothers version of Cinderella, and a lot more. It's a terrific show. It's a good representation of the book, but more than anything else, it has an amazing score, and I would have loved to have seen more Andre Previn, Johnny Mercer scores. But it ran respectably, but there was unfortunately a terrorism campaign going on in London at the time, and a lot of theatrical shows were brought to an end because people didn't want to travel into the capital. So it was a little bit of it suffered because of that. There have been cast recordings. It's been done on the radio. And I know some people who were there and saw it in the 70s. And as I say, it seems to hold this kind of aura of a great British musical that somehow hasn't been allowed to survive because its original run was cut short. But for those who saw it and for those who know the score, it's something special. The score, I could sing it to you backwards. It's much better forwards, but I could sing it to you better backwards. That is what I would like to see. So I would like to be there once again for the opening night of The Good Companions, and I'd love to pop along to the party afterwards and speak to Johnny Mercer, speak to Andre Previn, Have a drink with Judy Garland, with Judi Dench. Oh, Judy Garland
as well.
Yeah, I think Judy Garland probably wasn't going to be there in 1974, and all the others. John Mills would be an amazing man to talk to. So yes, it's a great show, great score, great cast. What more do you want?
Johnny Mercer write a load of Christmas songs. Or am I getting that confused with Johnny Kahn?
Sammy Kahn or Jimmy Van Heusen, you might be thinking of.
All the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
That is not a Johnny Mercer song. Johnny Mercer wrote "You've Got to Accentuate the Positive." Yeah. He wrote songs for Something's Got to Give. Do you know that? I mean, he was a prolific writer. He performed in the 30s and he wrote in the 30s, but actually, in some senses, his biggest era of writing was the 50s and the 60s. Yeah, a terrific man. Suffered a little bit from the demon drink, but talent, unbelievable talent. Yeah.
I think, I'm fascinated by your answers as well, because it's always...
Well, you and I coming from different positions slightly, as we always have.
I want to cheat slightly, if that's okay, for my final... well,
let's see if the flux capacitor allows you to flux everything up.
I'd like to go back to July 1954.
You've slipped into a different century, goodness me. Goodness. Give me that again. What was the date? 1954.
I think it was
when?
July 1954 or 1955. Let me just double check, because it's not typical musical theatre, but it is linked to musical theatre in the fact that July the 17th, 1955 is my choice.
3 years into the reign of the new Queen Elizabeth II.
Yes, but not in the country I'm going to. So
right, so it's non-British.
Yes, so I would like to go to the opening day of Disneyland.
Right, okay, I think we'll accept this. I think you've pushed at the envelope, but Disney, as you know, are a company that's been writing and making musicals almost more consistently than any other film company. And that will have been built into the DNA of Disneyland. So I also appreciate this touches your other interests, theme parks, etc.
You mentioned the Sherman Brothers that kind of put
triggered you
idea into light.
So tell me more.
Well, it was there's a documentary out at the moment, and it documents the fact that this park was built in 1 year.
Which is enormous. It was enormous. That's very impressive.
Yeah, but I'd like to see the opening day, because it was an absolute disaster.
Oh, was it?
There was no plumbing. Oh. There was a heat wave, so people...
That would have been a nice combination, that is.
People's stilettos were melting in the tarmac that hadn't dried yet. And...
It wasn't British workmanship, was it?
No, sadly it was...
sounds like it has all the hallmarks.
But there was a load of counterfeit tickets. I think an extra 80,000 people turned up who shouldn't have been there. So it was but to be at the very beginning of it's not a musical, but it's music everywhere. And I'd be interested to see how they did it back then. Like, I know Small World didn't exist then. That came later, but we had Pirates of the Caribbean, The Haunted Mansion came later. So to see it, it's very early.
So what was there? Do you know what was there when it opened in 55? And how were they connected to the Disney films of the period? Because that will give us a sense of what music might be playing.
There was a Peter Pan ride.
And that is a 50s film, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
40s possibly, I don't know. There was obviously the castle. There was King Arthur's Carousel was there as well. There was a Wind in the Willows ride, I think. I might be getting that wrong.
Which seems very parochial and British by comparison, doesn't it? But of course there was a Disney film of it.
There was, and the ride is actually quite interesting, because you get sentenced for bad driving and you go to hell.
Do you?
That's the ride.
Oh, right, okay.
It's
poop.
Yes, but let's see what rides were open at Disneyland in Anaheim. So, the carousel, the little things like boat tours, lots of trains.
Yes.
Cinemas, Sleeping Beauty Castle.
So that was another 50s film as well. So it's all contemporary. Some of it's contemporary stuff.
The Snow White ride obviously was a big part of it.
Well, it would have to be there, wouldn't it?
yeah, so it's kind of, I know it's not traditional musical theatre, but I think it would interest you as well, Thos.
It would. Well, also, as you probably know, my uncle was a Disney animator for his London studios in Soho, and he met Walt Disney.
Yeah.
So I would be interested in that. I think that it's a lovely...
And to see Walt's famous speech and things and kind of be there with all the opening day crowds and stuff to see.
But I think you can imagine exactly. Your Snow White music would be playing. And the Snow White score is amazing. I mean, what's fascinating is that it's now coming up for 90 years.
Something like that, 90.
Possibly more than that even.
Yeah.
So it's getting on for a century. And yet everyone can sing hi ho, it's often, and someday my prince will come. So it's immediately got two absolutely rock solid, copper bottomed songs which have, stood the test of time. Do you think that the Three Little Pigs might have been also in? Because I think of that as an early. That's a short, isn't it? It's an early Disney short with the.
I don't know a huge amount about the opening of Disneyland, which is why I'd be fascinated to see it, and I will watch this documentary that's surfaced. I think there's a Three Little Pigs reference somewhere in one of the gift shops or something. That there must be, but I know they reference Silly Symphonies a lot in their.
Which are the short cartoons,
That's my kind of. I've always been a pusher of musical theatre, and theme parks are the same thing, because if you work at Disneyland, you're not a worker, you're a cast member.
Yeah. And it does make sense.
And when you are amongst the guests, you are on stage.
Yeah.
And when you're putting your makeup on and apron on, whatever, you are backstage. So that there is, from the very beginning, it is being treated as a stage show, and they refer to the rides as the show.
Do they? You see, that's very interesting. And I think in a way it makes a nice contrast to where we've been so far. We spent a lot of time in theatrical auditoria. So actually to have something where we can go for a walk and have an ice cream in the open.
Yeah, not just in the interval.
Yeah. No, not just in the interval. I think that makes a nice little sort of full stop. So we're back in our time-travelling car. We've got to go back to now, 2026 as we record this, but we're allowed to have one look at something in the future if we want to. I'm going to let you go first. What would you like to look at?
Can I be really boring and just say, this is a big year for musical talk. I'd like to see, are we still around in 20 years' time, and how podcasting has changed, and how theatre has changed, and how the coverage of theatre has changed, and how you and I have changed. I know it's a bit of a cheesy...
No, I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing to do. And on top of that, of course, there's the one thing that won't have changed in the world of musical theatre. Everyone will still be talking about whether theatre tickets are too expensive. And I only mention this, funny enough, I was having this conversation with someone at lunchtime today in my office, because in a recent episode of Musical Talk, I was talking to Josh Clark, and we were looking at a copy of the Stage newspaper from 1925. And whilst everything else in terms of musical theatre and the stage and theatre has changed, there's a big article in this 1925 newspaper about...
Theatre costs 1 shilling.
Yeah, are theatre prices too high? And you think, well, that story's not going away.
What's your cutting point? Your kind of, no, not paying that. And are you someone that cares where you sit?
I do care where I sit, but it depends. It depends on the venue. So I sat in the very last possible seat that's furthest from the stage when I wanted to see Sunset Boulevard at the Savoy a few years ago, and that was not a problem. I had a fabulous view, and it was great. It was quite high. I didn't have vertigo, but I imagine you could have altitude sickness.
I hate the Savoy Theatre.
Oh, well, I'm sorry.
I had a lovely view of someone's head when I saw Paddington, and I was in one of the top seats in the theatre. Anyway, carry on.
Oh, right, okay. Well, I was fine in the very back seat, so I think you've been robbing yourself. But so in that case, that was fine, and that was a cheaper seat in London terms. But I can tell you the first time I chose not to pay the money for a West End ticket price was Acorn Antiques, because I've told you this story before, because at the time... the tickets came in at something like 75 quid, which struck me as a lot. On the Town had done the same thing the year before, and I'd ummed and ahed about that. But I wasn't set on seeing that. I would have absolutely have seen Acorn Antiques, But in the end, I thought that's too expensive. I'm not going to bother.
But would you have seen it and not pay £75, or do you?
You mean if I got a ticket for 40 quid, I'd have absolutely gone to see it. Yeah, I would have gone up to 60 quid at the time. 75 doesn't seem as much now, but
the reason I asked, and speaking of Paddington, it's I know we're wandering off topic, but it's kind of interesting about how theatre has changed over the years. I remember when Beauty and the Beast opened in London in 1997, £35 seemed a huge amount of money for a show then. Now Paddington, a family show, of extravagant family show, very good family show, £350
per ticket.
Yes,
top price, surely.
Yes,
yeah, ridiculous.
Where can this keep going?
Well, it can't. I mean, the question is,
we need to reset inflation and just start again from zero.
This is a discussion for another episode of Musical Talk, but the issue is you'll get the Allegro aspect, won't you? When Allegro came out by Rodgers and Hammerstein, every ticket was sold out for 2 years, like it was for Hamilton and things like that, because word of mouth says brilliant, and people with money will do it, and the aficionados will do it, and all the theatre lovers like ourselves will do it. But after that, no one will do it. So you get your core groups, but you don't get your non-core groups. And Allegro, Rodgers and Hammerstein, closed very shortly after all those advance sales were used up, as it were. I suspect at silly prices, all the people who are going to go and see it at any cost are going to go and see it at any cost. But all the people who are not going to see it at any cost but might like to see it won't go and see it. There'll be a lot of people who end up in a provincial pantomime because they wanted to take their family to see Paddington at Christmas or any other show, and they simply can't afford it. But that is a discussion for another day. I'm going to bring the episode, if I may, to a sort of close and our journey to a close by borrowing something. Well, no, but by borrowing something you said, because I want to look out of the porthole, as it were, in the future at one thing before we land back in 2026. And actually, before we started recording, you said, I think it's a really interesting idea. I want to go into the future. You didn't specify a time, but let's make it 30 years to see if Stephen Sondheim is still being produced, being performed. Is his legacy a lasting legacy, or is it a short to medium term legacy? Noel Coward, bless him. Noel Coward musicals aren't actually being produced, but Noel Coward plays are still being produced in the 21st century. This year, I think, is the 100th anniversary of The Vortex, which was his first big hit, first show. His shows are still being performed on the London stage and elsewhere 100 years later. He's got nothing to prove. He's done it. He's been dead since 1973.
Oliver's still on the Garrick, isn't it? And
that's true. No, but that's...
No, but...
because that's not Noel Coward's Oliver.
But Lionel Bart's legacy has...
Indeed, yeah.
Well, that show has...
His show, that is his legacy, is that show, not any of the others. Yeah. I'm afraid Blitz isn't going to take him anywhere, much as I like it. All the other ones. But Twang, perhaps, is not going to be remembered for anything positive. But Noel Coward's musicals are not. But it's interesting. His plays are still regularly done, and quite rightly. Stephen Sondheim, for the most part, his musicals, there's a few other bits and pieces, they're terrific musicals. There's an episode of Musical Talk that I've just recorded with Colin Malloy, which may well have been broadcast or will be broadcast soon if it hasn't been by the time this one goes out, which is looking at 4 Sondheims which were on in London last year alone. So far, his legacy's holding up. But it's really interesting to see in 30 years' time, is Sondheim remembered? And if Sondheim is remembered, which of his musicals are being revived? And will you catch Here We Are in 30 years' time? Or is it all going to be Into the Woods and A Little Night Music?
Well, we do have in many, many, many years' time
many years' time.
The film, well, speaking of the film they're making of Merrily We Roll Along.
Indeed.
Which they are making.
It's a TV film, though, isn't it?
I don't know, that they're doing it as the actors get older. So it's the longest filmmaking process. It's very risky.
Yeah.
Ever. So, but it's a brave choice. But yeah, I think it's kind of the commercial hits like Into the Woods and Sweeney Todd. Yeah. I think they'll survive.
Whereas the Frogs probably won't.
It'll be very interesting and we will end this episode here, even though it saddens me to say, but we will. I'm very interested to see how Sunday in the Park with George with Ariana Grande will do.
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, but
but that's going to open it up to a whole new audience.
Generation.
Yeah, and I can only appreciate that, and that's very, very good. But to see an Ariana Grande, a person who only knows pop music, go to not only a Sondheim show, but one of the more incredibly obscure Sondheim shows.
Well, it's not an obscure show, but it's an esoteric way of delivery. It's not an accessible Sondheim show in the way that some of the others are. Yeah, it's not an Into the Woods.
All the future stuff with the lasers and the modern could be interesting to see how that goes down. But yes.
Well, that was fabulous. Thank you for allowing us to look at a couple of things out of the porthole before we land. We are now back in our time machine car park, and we've been clamped.
I know.
So there's no more journeys, and we've got to pay a fine because we parked illegally. So I'm very sorry about that. We parked on a double yellow line. Who'd have thought it with our time machine?
Were we gone for a second, or were we gone for many, many weeks? That's the time machine.
Oh, I see. Yeah,
question.
well, that's the yes. Have we landed back in the time we set off?
Can we appeal our parking tickets? We actually never went anywhere.
Or the fine's been doubled because we actually
were there for
we're too
month.
long.
Yes.
But thank you. That was a really instructive and interesting journey. I had great pleasure being cooped up next to you in what I think might be a one-seater car. I'm not absolutely certain how to make friends and influence people. But thank you for that, Nick. That was terrific. Really interesting. And I look forward until a real time machine is invented and we can do all these things.
Yes, that'd be lovely.
Which I think is probably due in the next couple of years, isn't it?
And thank you for listening to this wonderful episode of Musical Talk. I'm Nick Hudson. You are Thos Ribbits. Sometimes.
But I can't disagree with either of those facts. Yeah.
We'll speak to you again soon. Until then, have a lovely day, listener. Thank you.
Have a lovely insert noun here.
And we'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Musical Talk. To find out more about the world of Musical Talk, you can visit our website at musicaltalk.co.uk, where you'll find all our episodes, or you can listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. Please follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Musical Talk.